the country. Thank you very much for your time and a good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I am well. A few things that I note is 5. You mentioned a specific group, Nehemiah Group. Then you go and mention another one. That's also the Lynch Pinnacle Group. Then you go ahead to mention some individuals, all based in the U.S. I might assume that you already have some information on those groups and the role they are playing there.
Yes, so one of the things we've been doing is that we've been tracking the conversations around the National Cathedral and also seeing certain gestures and individuals associated with it. And it seems to us that even the website that was built for the purposes of the cathedral seems to have a lot of people in the USA associated with it. We have individuals there who, in terms of raising funding in the US, their names come up prominently. You know, in terms of where they are coordinating donations, they have been listed, and we have even gone on to list these individuals as US representatives. So what we have done is that we have gone on then into the US and looked into the US company database and find out those individuals and the institutions or companies they are associated with. And we found out that, for instance, the Nehemiah Group have on their website that one of the projects they are working on, contracted to work on, is the National Cathedral, Ghana. So that kind of brings our attention. That if these people are saying that they've been contracted to work on the National Cathedral of Ghana, what does that mean? And what exactly role are they playing? What agreement is this to that effect? And how much have they been paid, right? So these are the questions started teasing out. So we noticed that the website of the National Cathedral said if you wanted to reach out to people at the National Cathedral, contact this person. And an individual is one Makeli Kobo. And this Makeli Kobo sounds like a name, it doesn't sound very much like a Ghanaian name, right? So we started digging up who this individual is. And we realized the individual is associated with another individual called Carrie Salmon. So like all these names are popping out, and we have no context as to how these individuals became involved in the project, which so far has been almost entirely Ghanaian funded. And so our interest then is now to dig into how these various groups became associated with the Ghana National Cathedral, how their companies are then writing them as projects or contracts they have won in respect of the Ghanaian-based project, and to get a bit more clarity as to what role they are playing, and even how they were found and chosen to act in this capacity.
Did I just hear you say that Nehemiah Group claimed to be the one working on the contract?
They claim that they have a contractual relationship that entitles them to fund or work for the National Cathedral, the National Cathedral. Now, we do not know exactly what contract this is and what role they are playing. And this is why we're trying to dig further to kind of determine what this is. And the only way we can direct our attention to is obviously the people locally here who are using the National Coat of Arms, who the executive director is listed on the list of presidential appointees, and are using the State House, right? That's all the incidences of a public institution, even though they told us that this was a private initiative. And so if it is clear if it quacks like a duck, works like a duck, then we might begin to treat it as a duck. And in this case, we're treating it as a public institution to which we're directing a right to information request to find out what is going on.
This is despite the fact that, because you say you are treating it as a public institution, so far we've been told that this is a public-private venture. So you're directing at them a right to information application for them to provide you that information that you need. And based on, you are saying you are not considering the fact that this could be purely a private venture.
So far, we have zero indications that tell us that this is truly a private venture and not a public initiative. We haven't, in any part of the conversation, been told how much it has raised privately. In fact, I think the only donation that I remember that was public came from the National Chief Imam. Okay? But public agencies are also entitled to raise private funds too. The question is whether or not, particularly in the case of this one, you have an executive director who is chosen and appointed by the president and who was listed, in fact, on the list of presidential appointees under the office of the president. So what that tells us that this is an initiative of the office of the president. But beyond that, if you look at some of the contracting that has come out, right? You look at the contract that was concluded with the Ajayi Associates Group of paying millions of dollars for consultation. It was signed by the chief of staff. So the contracting, just like the Agenda 111, is coming from within the office of the president itself. It is housed by the State House. That's where the office is. So far, it is using the coat of arms of Ghana as its letterhead. There's not any single thing that convinces anybody that is not a public venture. And to the extent that all these elements demonstrate that this is a public venture, and we have funded it to almost 200 million Ghana cedis, then it's clear that it can be subject to proceedings or processes that the right to information request, which is submitted as public initiative.
Well, there are several questions you ask about costs. For example, just amount of money paid to the trustees of the National Cathedral Secretariat. What gives you the impression that they received some monies?
Well, so far we know from documents which whistleblowers have revealed, showing that total public funds we know at this point, which have been paid to the National Cathedral Secretariat, has been 200 million. Because every money that is paid to service providers is directly paid to the Secretariat, which is organizing it. So we know this for a fact. What we don't know is that nobody has actually invoked legal processes so that they can provide that information without lying or refusing to provide clear details. And that's why we're initiating this process, to get a full sense of how much public funds have been already committed. We know that they put in place the short code 979. And this was the big thing. When they went to the Supreme Court and claimed that the thing was going to be funded entirely by private funding. We know that, for instance, Duncan Williams, who is one of the trustees, has went on record to say that he doesn't understand why people are fighting this, considering that it is so exclusively private money. And so we wanted to test that 979 to see what is the total money in fact raised towards the project. And that would give us an indication that out of the $350 million which has been budgeted for this, truly, how much has come from private sources towards this? And then we're asking for the list of all the donors to the National Cathedral. But one of the things we want to do is we cannot build a monument which comes from money laundering. And so transparency must be the watchword. And then every individual who has donated to the National Cathedral or institution must be disclosable. It must be transparent, it must be accountable. People can be able to take that and verify by their tax records at the GRA. And so we want to be able to get the list of all the donors to the National Cathedral at this point. And it's also important to even see what are some of the biggest champions to this are even themselves donated to it, right? Like the finance minister and the president and others. Let's see what they have contributed to the cathedral, because at this point, we don't even have that information. And then, like we were talking about, we're looking also at all the relationship of pictures with individuals that we can't even, say how they came involved in the project from outside of the country to be involved in this. We're looking at all of that information as well. But also importantly, even the cost of the stone that was imported from Israel, we want to be able to see how much it costs the Ghanaian taxpayer.
The cost of stone imported from Israel?
Yeah. There was a foundation stone. Well, they call it the foundation stone. It was in fact just a stone that they imported all the way from Israel because for biblical enthusiasts, people have sort of some connection with the biblical Israel, even though historians have demonstrated that they have something to do with the current place where this Israel is. But for some reason, they decided to go to Israel to import a stone from Israel to be part of the foundation of the cathedral. And we don't know the logic of that, but at least as taxpayers, one of the things we can ask for is how much did this cost us to bring the stone, put it in the plane from Israel, and come and dumped into the pit here.
You suggested that you wanted to know whether or not money being laundered is being used in perhaps building the cathedral. That's why you're asking for the list of donors.
Yeah.
Why do you say so? Because this is, you say it's coming from public funds. You've seen some monies from there. You are hearing them working with the church. How do they use laundered money in this regard?
So what we are saying is that if you look at some of our anti-money laundering commitments, okay, every literature around anti-money laundering tells us that where a lot of times persons who are looking to launder money push their money towards initiatives like this, and then write to the Ghana Revenue Authority or revenue authorities for tax refund. In that way, they are cleaning the money. It's a practice where, in a lot of money laundering ventures, people can contribute to social causes like this. And we are saying that if we are doing our own anti-money laundering commitments, individuals who have contributed to the project must be publicly disclosed. It must be disclosable. That gives confidence, and then everybody then can verify source of funding. Everybody can verify tax records of these individuals or institutions that are involved in that. Because one of the things we are committed, and myself as a Christian, is that we love the idea of cathedrals. We love the idea of glorifying God in some particular regard. What we don't want, and we think that the Bible is clear on this, is a building that is founded upon lies, deception, and theft and corruption. That defeats the purpose. So it is important for all Christians and God-loving individuals to be interested in where the money that is built in the cathedral comes from. Which are the people associated with it? Is the money coming from criminality? All these are important questions. And we can only get to the bottom of them if we have a clean idea or a list of all the individuals and where the sources of funding is coming from and contributing to a project like this.
I'll come back to the matter of lies, but I want to explain your 16th request to me. Copies of all revenue projections prepared on the revenue potential of the National Cathedral Secretariat. What do you mean by that?
So, there are two things which are in the public domain. The executive director of the National Cathedral Secretariat, that is Dr. Paulo Bukumensa, has gone on to say that they are expecting a windfall of over 800 million as revenue projections from what the cathedral is going to give us. Then the Minister of Finance, a couple of days ago, actually put the sum at $1.3 million. So there's a bit of disparity of how much they are projecting that we're going to get from this. So we want to know whether this is in fact, there's something which is said that 90% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So we want to understand whether or not when they get the mic before them, they throw out numbers, or in fact, there's a rigorous revenue projection that has been done, and based on what factors, which is telling them that this is money we can expect from this cathedral project. Because we have seen comparative projects in other places. So if Buanye built the Basilica of the Old Dame in Abidjan, which is one of the grandest projects, it cost over $600 million. At the time, it constituted twice the national debt of Abidjan. In fact, the whole project was built in time for him to die. And by the time he died, the only grand national event that was done in the Basilica was his funeral. Since then, it has not been used properly. Very fringe groups use it. It's not a source of tourism in Abidjan. And so we don't know how those projections come from. When there's a grander cathedral which was built in Abidjan, which is not attracting any of those revenue figures, it will be useful for us to be able to understand what we are paying for and how these people are promising us that all this money is going to come and from where. That's the context of that request.
You talk about lies, deception, and corruption. Of course, a lot of people have used these three words. So, why are you convinced that there are lies being told, there are issues of corruption to be addressed? Based on what do you think that this cathedral may be built on lies, deception, and corruption?
So let's start from the lies, because I'm not using any of these words interchangeably. Now, one of the things which we knew from the get-go, and we told Ghanaians that the government was insistent on, was that apart from the land that the government was committing to this, and in fact the land itself was valued at a lot of money. There are people whose buildings were broken down on that land, which cost a lot of money. There were buildings for judges which were broken down. There were new buildings, in fact, for judges which we had contracted a loan to build, loans which we haven't finished paying for. And the government broke all of those down and said it was committed only the land at that time. And so this is what he was saying. The whole public advocacy around the cathedral, the reason why they got so many church leaders involved in the project and succeed was based on the commitment that this was going to come from private revenue, and that individuals were building towards, were going to contribute and donate towards this. And a lot of people thought that, okay, this is an evidence or an avenue for them to be able to show commitment to God. I think that a lot of religious people in Abrahamic faith, not only Christians but also Muslims, love the idea of being able to contribute to the building of a temple or a cathedral for their religion, because they believe that it has a lot of blessings in it. But the government says this to us and inaugurates a short code to in this connection. But so far then, we've seen so many documents which have subsequently revealed that in fact the government was committing so much money to the process. These are public funds that the government was committing to it, while it was maintaining in the public that it wasn't doing that. Until those documents came out, and now you have the finance minister and others and the apologists coming out to admit that this was the case. So the deliberate lying to the Ghanaian public is a strong matter of concern, because it undermines then the purity of the project that is being embarked on. And the thing is about the deception. Now,
before you move to the deception, there are those who have suggested, in fact, they've gone back to say that when you look at the 2019 budget read in 2018, government had already given us an indication that some amount of money was going to be spent on the National Cathedral. They talk about land, they talk about the secretariat, and then they talk about seed money. And that they are saying that, so if you've looked at the money spent, they cannot be considered as seed money. One of the documents even referred to additional seed money. Is that not enough to deal with the matter of whether or not public funds were going to be spent?
So one of the things I've been very clear about is that even the contribution of land is a marker, it's a public funding. Okay? Now it's not being accepted by anybody who's talking about it that zero public funding was going to go into it. They said that the extent of public contribution to it was going to be the land. Now, when we go to the budget, now let's remind ourselves that Parliament holds the public sector, the master control of the public sector. There was no vote of any particular amount of money by Parliament towards the initiative. No vote of money was being pushed towards the National Cathedral. That is an indication that this is not a matter that you're going to commit public resources towards. Now, if they said to Parliament that they were going to provide the Secretariat, we understood, and the government had said from the beginning, that we were going to play a facilitation role in the process. And the facilitation role is where they have what they call the Secretariat to coordinate it. And that's fine. Right? That's what people accepted at the time. My point is not that, obviously a lot of people have challenges with the fact that there's public funding component to this. But that's what the government says must be its bond. And so if it says to Ghanaians that you're not going to commit more than that, that's it. But you cannot say blanketly that I am going to give you your lunch money and then give the person a 1 year salary. That's not lunch revenue. Right? So when you say you're going to give seed money to a project without disclosing the amount, nobody is expecting that you're paying nearly up to this point 200 million Ghana cedis and claim that that's all part of seed money. No, that's in fact, it moves in the area of deception and fraudulent misrepresentation, right? Because you get a deception from that. They're intentionally misleading people and deceiving the public as to what you're planning to do with regards to that. But the critical point for me is that only Parliament can vote a certain amount of money to that purpose. And any expense or money used not in that connection is money that has been used fraudulently. And in fact, it must extract sanctions from Parliament. And that's whether or not Parliament is aware to that rule is a different question for us to discuss. But nobody can tell me that the government can put 200 million Ghana cedis from petty cash towards this project from unaccountable interest. If the government can spend 200 million from unaccountable interest, how much are we giving the presidency that you are telling it not to account for? And how does that not drive corruption? You know?
So, have you submitted the application to the National Cathedral Secretariat yet?
Yes, we have. I mean, we did that 3 days ago. You know, we are yet to receive a response from them.
Okay.
But the law gives them 14 days to do that. And I think the only time where you're going to see government institutions rush to give you information is where the dividing line is whether or not the information favors government propaganda, and so they can hand it over to you the next day, like we saw with Paul Adumotu on the head job that he was trying to do on Kabu after that. But in this case, we are going to wait for the full 14 days. And if they don't do that, which give us the information requested, we continue to use the right information at which requires us to seek an internal review before going to the Right to Information Commission.
But they have acknowledged receipts, I believe.
No, they haven't yet acknowledged receipts. I mean, I think the most important thing is giving them. They are not required to come back to you and say we acknowledge it. They are only bound by law to respond to you in 14 days. So the process is to wait for that 14 days for them to come back and give us the information requested. And if they don't, then we go through the other processes of law. In fact, and you know, it's interesting that you mentioned this. Because it's just one of the biggest things that the country has been complaining about, where institutions like the Ghana Police Force and so many other public institutions categorically refuse to acknowledge receipts of requests and letters submitted to them. And I don't know how we continue to allow this to operate in a democracy. It's like these institutions are operating, you know, outside the peripheries or in the margins of law and public decency.
And that's why I'm asking, because there are several times when letters are sent to public officials, they come back and then they will tell you that, oh, I have not seen it. When did you submit it? All of a sudden, the deadline of 14 days is gone, and the public officials deny ever seeing the application you sent. That's why I've asked you about receipt.
Yes. In fact, we've seen that happen, which led the incident which led to the criminal prosecution of Ernesto Yeboah, where they had formally notified the police about the Black Lives Matter vigil, and the police deliberately lose it and come back and arrested the individual for not notifying them. So one of the things that we have decided now to be doing is not only to be secret recording anytime you're giving anything to a public institution, but also make sure that you're sending this by email where there's an electronic marker of the time when the thing was sent. And so that there cannot be any other, we put a lot of care into really proving that we have sent something to a public institution. And it's sad that you and I are having this conversation of public institutions in this country being at deception and, you know, not based on honesty. It's really sad.
One last question before you go. Put all this together, all the information you are requesting. Already the cathedral has earned quite a reputation over the past month. Why should they give you information, fix the country information? Would it not serve to perhaps paint a cathedral that's supposed to be serving God much more black than it already is?
So the process of giving us information does not paint the cathedral black. It means that the black already existed and the information is revealing it. And if that's the case, that should give us a cause for worry. But I think it's a real test as well as to whether or not we are proceeding in truth and with the kind of decency that religious matters of this nature require. As to whether or not the cathedral, the person building the cathedral, will be so transparent about their dealings and feel so comfortable because they are working in the light. I think we are not. And we become now fearful of public information around something which is supposed to glorify a pure God. It's a matter of concern. And that must really, tap into the conscience of all public, well-meaning individuals, including even people who are on the board of trustees, as men of God who are involved in this process. I am, for instance, not surprised that Mr. CATHEDRAL has walked away from the project, despite the fears that if he did walk away, the government will become now interested in reviving the criminal matter which they have deliberately put in place to try to guard him. So far, it seems to have worked. But I suppose that the camp was full and was running over that they decided to walk away from the project. And I think that when we get into that stage, other persons of faith who are associated with the project now would now start to question their conscience and will realize that they are being used to launder the image of a project which is based on, like we say, lies, deception, and corruption.
We'll see what comes out of this. Oliver, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
Oliver BARKER, VORMAWOR, is convener of #FixTheCountry.